Moving into Sunnyside Estates seemed like the perfect fresh start. The streets were clean, the lawns meticulously maintained, and every house looked like it belonged in a magazine spread for suburban perfection. I had been warned about the strict homeowners association, but I was not concerned. I kept to myself and followed rules. What could possibly go wrong? The trouble began with parking, specifically with one unremarkable spot next to the community mailbox. During my first week of unpacking, I noticed something strange. Despite the neighborhood's constant vehicle shuffle, that particular space remained perpetually empty. It was not marked. It was not reserved. It simply existed in a strange vacuum of availability. The previous owner never mentioned assigned parking, I told the realtor when I called to double-check. She confirmed there were no official assignments beyond the driveways and garages. The street parking was public property. First come, first served. So on my third day, when I needed to make room in my driveway for a delivery truck, I parked my car in the vacant spot. The vehicle itself was nothing special, a standard-issue gray sedan with government plates. My cousin Thomas had arranged for me to use one of the department's unmarked cars while mine was being repaired after an accident. It was utterly forgettable by design. I was unloading groceries from the trunk when I felt it, that unmistakable sensation of being watched. Across the street stood a woman in her 50s, arms crossed tightly over her chest, staring at me with such intensity that I involuntarily checked my zipper. Her blonde hair was cut into a perfect bob, and her gardening gloves suggested I had interrupted her landscaping ritual. "Good afternoon," I called out, attempting neighborly politeness. She did not respond. She did not wave. She simply turned and marched back into her house, closing the door with deliberate force. The next morning, I discovered my first note. Tucked beneath my windshield wiper was a piece of floral stationery folded precisely in thirds. "Please do not park in this spot. It is consistently used by others. Your rudeness has been noted." No signature. No explanation of who these others might be. Just a passive-aggressive demand written in perfect cursive. I removed the note, looked around the still empty street, and went to work. That evening, the same spot remained vacant, so I parked there again. The second note appeared before sunrise. Entitled, "Newcomers like you are ruining this community. This spot has always been respected as reserved. Find somewhere else." By day 5, I knew exactly who was leaving the notes. Her name was Karen Whitfield, according to the mailbox across the street. She was the HOA president, a position she had apparently held for 7 consecutive years. Each morning, she would stand at her living room window, coffee mug in hand, glaring at my vehicle as if it were a medieval siege tower threatening her castle. I considered confronting her. I considered explaining that my temporary vehicle belonged to law enforcement. I even considered parking elsewhere just to maintain peace. But something about the entitlement, the assumption that an unmarked public space belonged to her by divine right, made me hold my ground. "Has she always been like this?" I asked another neighbor while collecting my mail. "Karen, oh, she has gotten worse since her divorce," he whispered, eyes darting toward her house. "Best not to cross her. She has connections with the city council and the HOA board eats from her hand. Most people just accommodate her preferences." So that explained the perpetually empty parking space. It was not reserved, it was feared. An entire neighborhood had been conditioned to avoid a perfectly legal parking spot because one woman had claimed it as her territory. I did not reply to the notes. I did not engage in her territorial display. I simply continued to park in the public spot whenever it made sense to do so. And each time, I felt the temperature of her stare drop another degree. What I did not realize then was that I had inadvertently declared war, and Karen Whitfield was not someone who lost wars in Sunnyside estates. The passive-aggressive campaign escalated with remarkable efficiency. By the second week, Karen had moved beyond handwritten notes to formal HOA complaints. A letter arrived in my mailbox, printed on official Sunnyside Estates letterhead, citing concerns about an abandoned vehicle creating aesthetic disruption in the community common areas. "But I drive it every day," I explained when I called the HOA office. "It cannot possibly be considered abandoned." The administrator sounded apologetic but firm. "We have received multiple reports about the vehicle appearing suspicious. Ms. Whitfield has provided documentation suggesting the car remains in the same spot for extended periods, which violates Section 7, Paragraph 3 of our community guidelines." Documentation: she is photographing my car. "Sir, the HOA takes all member concerns seriously. Consider this a friendly reminder about our parking etiquette." The next phase of Karen's strategy revealed itself on garbage day. My trash can, which I had placed neatly by the curb the previous evening, was mysteriously overturned by morning. Garbage scattered precisely around my car tires. This happened 3 consecutive weeks, always on the days I parked in the contested spot. Then came the mailbox incidents. I would return home to find my mailbox wide open, my mail damp from unexpected afternoon sprinkler malfunctions that somehow only affected my property. When I installed a small camera facing my mailbox, the tampering stopped immediately, but the tension only grew. One evening, as I settled in to watch a baseball game, my smartphone alerted me to motion detected on my recently installed doorbell camera. The footage showed Karen, wrapped in a quilted bathrobe, creeping along my driveway with a flashlight. She circled my car slowly, the beam of light moving across the license plate, the tires under the chassis. She was not vandalizing, not yet, but documenting, preparing, gathering intelligence like a suburban spy. I downloaded the footage and sent it to Thomas. "You might want to see what your car is up to at night," I wrote. His response came quickly. "Interesting neighbor you have there. Want me to run her name?" "Not yet," I replied, "just documenting the pattern." The following Thursday, Karen abandoned subtlety altogether. As I unloaded shopping bags from the trunk, she approached with 2 other women trailing behind her like henchwomen in a high school drama. "We need to discuss your continued disregard for community standards," she announced, loud enough for anyone within 50 feet to hear. I straightened my back. "Good afternoon, Ms. Whitfield. Is there a problem?" "That spot," she pointed dramatically, "has been my guest parking for 15 years. Everyone in this neighborhood understands that. I was not informed of any reserved street parking when I purchased my home." Her face tightened. "This is not about legal technicalities. This is about respect for established community norms. Your vehicle does not even have proper identification markings." "It is a legally registered automobile," I responded calmly. "It looks suspicious," one of her companions added. "People are concerned about safety." "And property values," Karen continued. "Unknown vehicles attract the wrong element to our community." The confrontation drew attention. Neighbors pretended to check their mailboxes or suddenly needed to inspect their flower beds, all while straining to overhear our exchange. "Ms. Whitfield," I said quietly, "this is a public street with unassigned parking. If you have specific concerns about my vehicle, I suggest you contact the appropriate authorities." Her eyes narrowed at the subtle challenge. "Oh, I have, and I will continue to do so until this situation is resolved properly. The board agrees with me. This neighborhood operated smoothly before you arrived, and we intend to ensure it continues that way." She turned sharply, her companions following in perfect formation, leaving me standing beside my government-issued vehicle feeling like an invader in my own neighborhood. That night, I received an email from the HOA board requesting my attendance at a community harmony discussion regarding ongoing parking disputes. 6 board members had signed the request. All 6 names appeared on Karen's regular dinner party invitation list, according to another neighbor who had warned me about the neighborhood politics. The trap was closing. Karen had the board, the neighbors, and the power of long-established social hierarchy on her side. What she did not know was that the nondescript car at the center of this suburban Cold War belonged to the man who commanded every police officer in the district. And her next move would transform this petty dispute into something far more serious. The morning dawned with perfect clarity, one of those days where the sky seems impossibly blue and the air carries the scent of freshly cut grass and possibility. I had planned a long walk through the neighborhood park, perhaps finally introducing myself to the more friendly-looking neighbors I had spotted walking their dogs. The contested parking spot near the mailbox stood empty, as if inviting me to continue our strange territorial chess match. I parked there without hesitation. After 3 weeks of escalating tension, the act had become almost ritualistic, a small rebellion against unwritten rules and unofficial power. I locked the car, pocketed the keys, and set off toward the park, feeling the weight of unseen eyes tracking my movement from behind curtained windows. The park offered temporary sanctuary from the neighborhood drama. I walked for nearly 2 hours, circling the duck pond twice and stopping to watch a youth soccer practice on the community field. For those peaceful moments, I forgot about Karen Whitfield and her crusade against my parking habits. That tranquility shattered the moment I rounded the corner back onto my street. Even from a distance, something looked wrong about my car. The silhouette sat lower on the driver's side, an unnatural tilt that made my stomach drop before my mind fully processed what I was seeing. As I drew closer, the damage became unmistakable. Both tires on the left side completely flat, not slowly leaking, not accidentally deflated, but violently punctured. Beside each tire lay small pieces of rubber, carved away by whatever sharp instrument had been used. This was not random vandalism. This was precise, targeted destruction. Under the windshield wiper secured by the same spot where Karen had left her previous notes was a white envelope. My hands did not shake as I removed it. They were too numb with the cold realization of how far this had gone. Inside was a typewritten message, the impersonal font at odds with the personal venom of the words. "This is your warning. The spot is mine. Next time it will be all 4 tires and maybe more. Parking thief." I stood absolutely still, letting the shock crystallize into something harder and colder. Around me, the neighborhood continued its afternoon routine. Someone was mowing their lawn 2 houses down. Children played in a sprinkler across the street. And somewhere, perhaps watching from behind blinds, Karen Whitfield was likely savoring her victory. My first instinct was to march directly to her door to confront her with evidence and outrage. But years of listening to my cousin's stories about escalated neighborhood disputes held me back. Instead, I took out my phone and methodically photographed everything. The slashed tires, the note, the position of the car, even the street signs showing no parking restrictions. Then I called Thomas. "Someone slashed the tires on your department vehicle," I said when he answered. A moment of silence. Then, "Are you certain it was deliberate?" 2 tires, clean cuts, and a threatening note left on the windshield. His voice shifted from casual to professional in an instant. Do not touch anything else. I am sending a patrol car right now. This is not just vandalism of private property. It is damage to government property. That is a felony. Within 15 minutes, a police cruiser pulled up beside my damaged vehicle. The responding officers took my statement with professional detachment, but I noticed how their expressions darkened when they realized whose car had been targeted. One of them called for a forensic technician to photograph the scene properly and collect the note for fingerprint analysis. Chief Thompson said to tell you he is taking a personal interest in this case, the older officer informed me quietly. He wants a full report by evening. As they worked, I noticed movement across the street. Karen had emerged from her house, ostensibly to collect her mail. She stood by her mailbox far longer than necessary, watching the police activity with poorly disguised interest. When she caught me looking at her, she did not glance away in shame or concern. Instead, she smiled, a small, satisfied curve of the lips that vanished as quickly as it had appeared. That evening, as I waited for the tow truck to deliver the car to the police impound lot for evidence processing, I overheard Karen speaking loudly on her back patio. Her voice carried clearly in the still evening air as she laughed with someone on the phone. Sometimes people need to learn respect the hard way, she was saying. I have lived here 15 years. 15 years. You cannot just roll in and take what has always been mine. I guarantee that eyesore will not be parked there again. I recorded the conversation on my phone and immediately sent it to Thomas. His response was immediate. Do not engage, do not confront. We are building a case now. Let her think she has won. The next day, a replacement department vehicle, identical to the first, was delivered to my house. Thomas called to explain the plan. Park it in exactly the same spot, he instructed. Act normal. Act defeated if you can. Let her believe her intimidation worked. And then what? I asked. And then we wait for her to make her next move. Because people like this always make another move. He was right. Karen Whitfield was not finished with me, but neither was justice finished with Karen Whitfield. These are not your average home security systems, Thomas explained as he and a plainclothes officer installed the equipment early Sunday morning. These are the same models we use for stakeouts. The cameras were remarkably small, black discs no larger than a quarter that disappeared against the dark trim of my garage and the community mailbox post. Each contained a high-resolution lens with infrared capability for night recording and motion activation sensors that would begin capturing footage whenever someone approached within 15 feet of my vehicle. The feed goes directly to the precinct server, Thomas continued. Tamper-proof, weather-resistant, and the battery lasts for 2 weeks between charges. Is all this really necessary? I asked, still uncomfortable with the escalation, despite being the victim. Thomas paused his work. Cousin, this stopped being about a parking dispute the moment she committed a felony. Damaging government property, threatening further vandalism. These are serious crimes. And based on her pattern of behavior, she is likely to escalate again. The installation took less than an hour. Once completed, the surveillance system was virtually invisible to anyone not specifically looking for it. Thomas showed me the feed on a secure application he installed on my phone. The clarity was startling. I could read license plates from 30 feet away. Go about your normal routine, he advised before leaving. Park in the same spot when it makes sense to do so. Do not act suspicious or keep checking the cameras. We will monitor everything remotely. That afternoon, as if celebrating her victory over me, Karen hosted what appeared to be an impromptu HOA gathering on her front lawn. Neighbors arrived carrying covered dishes and folders thick with papers, the unmistakable signs of an unofficial board meeting. From my living room window, I watched as she held court, gesturing occasionally toward the now empty parking spot with the triumphant air of a general indicating conquered territory. For 3 days, I avoided the spot, parking instead in my driveway or on the opposite side of the street. I needed Karen to believe her tactics had succeeded. On the 4th day, following Thomas's instructions, I parked the replacement vehicle in the original location and left it overnight. The notification came at 2:17 a.m. Motion detected, my phone announced quietly beside my bed. I opened the application to find the night vision camera displaying a real-time feed of 2 figures approaching my car. The first was unmistakably Karen, her distinctive bob illuminated faintly by the streetlight as she glanced nervously up and down the empty street. Behind her, a much younger figure, a teenage boy, carried what appeared to be a small tool kit. "This is the one," Karen whispered loudly. "Be quick about it." The boy knelt beside the front tire and began manipulating something metal against the wheel. With shocking clarity, the camera captured him systematically loosening the lug nuts on each tire, not removing them completely, but ensuring they were dangerously loose. "Not too much," Karen instructed, "just enough that they will not notice until they are driving." My blood ran cold at the implication. This was no longer simple vandalism. This was potentially lethal sabotage. The boy finished with the wheels and stepped back. "Done," he whispered. "Can I go now?" "One more thing," Karen replied, producing a small canister from her jacket pocket. She approached the rear of the vehicle and began spraying something across the license plate, cheap orange paint that obscured the government identification numbers. "Now they cannot prove it is even their car," she said with evident satisfaction. "Let them try to file a report with no plate number." The entire operation took less than 10 minutes. As they retreated across the street, the boys' nervous laughter drifted through the night air. "That will teach them to mess with you, Aunt Karen." I immediately called Thomas, forwarding the footage before he could even ask for details. "We have got her," he said after reviewing the video. "Criminal mischief, endangerment, tampering with government identification, contributing to the delinquency of a minor. The district attorney will have multiple felony charges to work with." "What now?" I asked. "Now we prepare the trap. I hear there is an HOA emergency meeting scheduled for tomorrow evening. Something about community safety concerns." "Yes," I confirmed. "Karen called it herself. Everyone received notices yesterday." "Perfect," Thomas replied. "I think it is time I attended my first Sunnyside Estates HOA meeting, and I will be bringing some interesting visual aids." The Sunnyside Estates Community Center buzzed with unusual energy that evening. Typically, HOA meetings struggled to achieve minimum attendance, but tonight every chair was filled, with additional residents standing along the back wall. Karen's campaign about dangerous elements threatening our community values had generated precisely the crowd she wanted for her moment of triumph. I arrived early and took a seat in the far corner, trying to remain inconspicuous. Thomas entered separately, dressed not in his police uniform but in business casual attire that allowed him to blend seamlessly with the other homeowners. He carried a leather portfolio and nodded politely to neighbors as he claimed a chair in the back row. Karen stood at the front of the room beside a small projector setup, arranging papers with the practiced efficiency of someone accustomed to commanding these meetings. She wore a crisp blue blazer with a Sunnyside Estates pin on the lapel, her hair freshly styled, her expression one of grave concern as she surveyed the gathered residents. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she began once the room settled. "As your HOA president for 7 consecutive terms, I have always prioritized the safety and property values of our community above all else." Murmurs of agreement rippled through her supporters. "Recently, we have observed troubling developments that threaten the harmony we have worked so hard to maintain." Her gaze swept meaningfully in my direction. "Disregard for established community norms, suspicious vehicles without proper identification, individuals who refuse to cooperate with neighborhood standards." The crowd shifted uncomfortably, many glancing toward me with newfound suspicion. "Tonight, I propose an amendment to our HOA bylaws," Karen continued, her voice strengthening. "One that would establish formal regulations regarding street parking and vehicle identification requirements. For too long, we have relied on mutual respect and understanding. But when new elements refuse to honor our traditions—" "Excuse me," Thomas interrupted, rising from his seat with calm authority. "Before we continue, I have some relevant information to share with the community." Karen frowned at the interruption. "The agenda does not allow for open comments until after the presentation." "I believe this cannot wait," Thomas replied, walking toward the front of the room. "It directly concerns the safety issues you mentioned." Karen's eyes narrowed. "And you are?" "Thomas Thompson, Chief of Police for this district," he answered, removing his department identification from his pocket. "And owner of the vehicle that has been repeatedly vandalized in this neighborhood over the past month." The room fell silent. Karen's face drained of color. "I do not know what you mean. This meeting is about community safety guidelines." "Indeed it is," Thomas agreed, connecting his phone to the projector cable. "Which is why the residents should see this footage captured 2 nights ago." The screen illuminated with the crystal-clear night vision recording. Karen and the teenage boy approached my vehicle. Their whispered conversation played loudly through the room's speakers. The methodical loosening of the lug nuts, the deliberate defacing of government property. "That is not me," Karen protested as her own face filled the screen. "This is obviously fabricated, an attempt to silence legitimate community concerns." Thomas paused the video on a frame that perfectly captured Karen's face as she directed the boy to spray the license plate. "Ms. Whitfield, we have collected multiple pieces of evidence connecting you to repeated acts of vandalism and harassment. The vehicle you targeted is registered to the police department." Karen's composure cracked entirely. "He parked in my spot," she shouted, pointing wildly in my direction. "Everyone knows that spot is mine. I have parked there for 15 years. "There are no assigned street parking spaces in public thoroughfares," Thomas replied calmly. "However, there are very clear laws against vandalism, harassment, falsifying complaints, endangerment, and involving minors in criminal activity." Karen grabbed her purse and papers. "This meeting is adjourned. I will not stand here and be ambushed by." She turned toward the exit only to find 2 uniformed officers standing quietly by the door. "Ms. Whitfield," one of them said, "we need you to come with us to answer some questions regarding the evidence just presented." The room erupted in shocked conversations as Karen's face contorted with rage and disbelief. Her carefully constructed authority collapsed in real time as neighbors who had feared her for years watched her being escorted from her own meeting. "You planned this," she hissed as she passed my chair. "You infiltrated our community just to target me." I said nothing. There was nothing left to say. The cameras had spoken more effectively than any words could have. "Karen Whitfield, You are under arrest for criminal mischief, tampering with government property, contributing to the delinquency of a minor, filing false police reports, and attempted reckless endangerment." The officer recited the charges clearly, each word echoing across the suddenly silent parking lot outside the community center. Neighbors who had streamed out of the meeting stood in a loose semicircle, witnessing the unthinkable, their HOA president being handcuffed beside a patrol car with its lights flashing. "This is outrageous." Karen's voice had taken on a shrill quality I had not heard before. "Do you know who I am in this community? I have connections with the city council." "Ma'am, please lower your voice," the officer responded calmly. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As the Miranda rights continued, Karen's gaze locked onto me with such intensity that several neighbors stepped back. "You," she snarled, "you did this. You are not even a real resident. You are some kind of infiltrator they sent to spy on us." Thomas stepped forward. "Ms. Whitfield, no one sent anyone to spy on you. My cousin purchased his home legitimately and has every right to park on public streets. Your actions in response have resulted in over $12,000 in property damage and created a potentially lethal safety hazard." The mention of the dollar amount caused audible gasps among the onlookers. Karen's face flushed deep red as she struggled against the handcuffs. "It is just parking. Everyone understood the system before he came." She twisted toward the crowd, seeking allies. Tell them how things work here." But no support materialized. Neighbors averted their eyes or slowly drifted away from the scene. Years of accumulated fear and resentment toward Karen prevented anyone from speaking in her defense. "The minor involved will be questioned separately," Thomas informed her as the officers prepared to place her in the back of the patrol car. "Given his age and your relationship as his aunt, there will be additional considerations. You cannot drag my nephew into this. He is just 16. "You brought him into this, Ms. Whitfield," Thomas replied. "The video evidence clearly shows you directing him to commit crimes that could have resulted in serious injury or death to innocent people." The gravity of that statement settled over the gathering. Loosened lug nuts on a moving vehicle could cause catastrophic tire failure at speed, potentially killing not only the driver but others on the road. As the patrol car pulled away, Karen twisted in the back seat to stare out the rear window, her expression a mixture of fury and disbelief. By midnight, her booking photo had been processed and entered into the public record. By morning, it had spread through neighborhood messaging groups and local news websites. The following days brought a parade of unexpected visitors to my door. Neighbors who had previously avoided eye contact now arrived with casseroles, wine bottles, and apologies. "We should have warned you properly," explained Mrs. Chen from 2 doors down. "But she had everyone so intimidated. Last year, she had my husband fined for planting unapproved flowers. The year before, she blocked the Johnson's house addition for months over a 1-inch discrepancy in the submitted plans." Even HOA board members came to express contrition. "We never approved of her methods," insisted the treasurer, a nervous man who could not quite meet my eyes. "But she controlled the meeting agendas, the complaint process, everything." The most surprising visitor was the HOA vice president, a retired judge who arrived with an official letter in hand. "On behalf of the board, I wish to formally apologize for failing to address Ms. Whitfield's increasingly erratic behavior," he stated formally. "We have convened an emergency session and unanimously voted to remove her as president, effective immediately." Thomas stopped by that evening, bringing steaks to grill on my back patio. As we ate, he shook his head in amazement. "You know what impressed me most?" he asked. "Your restraint. Most people would have confronted her directly after the first incident. That confrontation would have given her exactly what she wanted, an excuse to paint you as aggressive, unreasonable, threatening. I just did not want to create unnecessary drama," I explained. Thomas laughed. "And instead, you created the most masterful takedown this neighborhood has ever seen. The district attorney is filing additional charges after reviewing her HOA records. Apparently, she has been manipulating financial documents for years, directing fines into an unauthorized account." "What will happen to her?" "With the combined charges, she is facing significant community service at minimum, possibly jail time for the endangerment charge." He raised his glass. "To patience, the most underrated weapon in the arsenal of justice." The "for sale" sign appeared exactly 27 days after Karen's arrest. It materialized overnight, standing perfectly straight in her immaculate front lawn, the final white flag of surrender in our unintended war. No moving trucks came. No goodbye parties were held. Karen Whitfield departed Sunnyside Estates as quietly as morning fog burns away under summer sun. According to neighborhood gossip, now freely shared without fear of retribution, she had accepted a plea deal that included significant community service, restitution payments, and mandatory anger management classes. The more serious endangerment charges had been reduced in exchange for her agreement to sell her home and relocate outside the district. The HOA transformed with remarkable speed. The interim board, led by the retired judge, implemented a comprehensive review of all bylaws and enforcement procedures. Previous fines were audited, revealing dozens of questionable penalties that Karen had imposed without proper documentation or board approval. "We are creating a more transparent system," explained the new HOA secretary during the first post-Karen community meeting. "All complaints will be reviewed by a 3-person committee rather than a single individual. No more midnight garden inspections or surprise violation notices." The most symbolic change came in the form of a small, official-looking sign that appeared next to the community mailbox. "Public parking, no reserved spaces." My government-issued vehicle continued to occupy that infamous spot approximately 3 days each week. No notes appeared on my windshield. No tires were slashed. The war over 8 feet of public asphalt had ended as decisively as any territorial dispute in history. More importantly, the neighborhood itself began to heal from years of Karen's reign. Residents who had never spoken now exchanged greetings on morning walks. Community events that had withered under her control blossomed anew: impromptu barbecues, children's play dates, even a book club that met on rotating front porches. "You know what the strangest part is?" my next-door neighbor commented one evening as we watched children playing freely on the street, something rarely seen during the Karen era. "Nobody actually liked her system. We all just went along with it because confronting her seemed worse than giving up our autonomy." I understood completely. Fear of conflict had allowed one person's irrational demands to reshape an entire community's behavior. My refusal to participate in that system had not only reclaimed a parking space, it had helped reclaim the neighborhood's sense of balance. 6 weeks after Karen's departure, Thomas invited me to dinner at his favorite steakhouse downtown. He arrived in his official vehicle, complete with department insignia and light bar, a stark contrast to the unmarked car that had inadvertently sparked our neighborhood saga. "The department wanted me to personally thank you," he said after we ordered. "Not just for your patience during the vandalism, but for helping us uncover the broader issues in your HOA. 3 other neighborhoods under Karen's influence have now reported similar patterns of intimidation and financial discrepancies. I did not do anything special, I insisted. I just refused to give up a public parking spot. Thomas smiled. Sometimes the most powerful act of resistance is simply not participating in someone else's delusion. By the way, he reached into his jacket pocket and extracted a small envelope. I brought you something. Inside was a professionally printed parking permit designed to hang from a rearview mirror. The text read, "Official parking authorization, the spot next to the mailbox." I laughed until tears formed in my eyes. "It is not legally binding," Thomas admitted, "but I thought you deserved some recognition." As I drove home that evening, I deliberately parked in the now infamous spot. From my car, I could see new residents moving into Karen's former house, a young family with 2 small children who waved enthusiastically when they spotted me watching. I waved back, then glanced at Thomas's mock parking permit now hanging from my mirror. The spot had never belonged to Karen. It had never belonged to anyone. But the simple act of claiming common space as personal territory had revealed the fragility of community harmony and the strength that comes from standing your ground with quiet, patient determination. Sometimes justice is not delivered with dramatic courtroom pronouncements or public confrontations. Sometimes it simply waits in a parking spot, persisting until the truth becomes impossible to ignore.